The Ouroboros is a depiction of a serpent biting or eating its own tail. A beast eternally consuming itself, it's a potent piece of iconography beloved by Gnostics and alchemists. Homestuck is one such Ouroboros. A tangled beast that defies easy categorization, is incredibly self-obsessed, and is pregnant with a melange of symbolism and themes that are at once incredibly obvious and frustratingly obtuse. To speak of Homestuck is to invite your own destruction, as it is freakishly convoluted, yet if you persist in analyzing it, you will be rewarded with an esoteric mess. 10 years ago today, I saw that mess conclude, and realized that the story I had been avidly following for years, one that had deeply influenced my psyche at a formative period of my life, had at some point fallen completely apart. So let's dissect the desiccated corpse of this once seemingly eternal serpent, now that 10 years of decay have hopefully made it easier to parse. What is Homestuck seems like an easy question to answer, and yet it has stymied people for almost 20 years now. The trouble comes partially from the fact that Homestuck changed fairly drastically over the course of its 7-year run. At its inception, it was a sort of real-time illustrated collaborative choose-your-own-adventure. It was the fourth such creation in a series called MS Paint Adventures, run by Andrew Hussey. Early in its existence, however, Hussey decided to take more firm control over the narrative, although audience participation was still present in minor ways. As Homestuck continued, it would add animated and interactive elements, becoming a sort of multimedia cross between a webcomic, an animatic, a video game, and a novel. That multimedia cross was, like much of the contemporary internet, built on the foundation of Adobe Flash, and was nearly annihilated by Adobe's senseless murder of the application. While I cannot in good conscience recommend Homestuck to someone who isn't already familiar with it, if, for some reason, you do want to experience Homestuck, the best way to do so is currently through the unofficial Homestuck collection, a fan project that faithfully maintains Homestuck in close to its original form. To properly summarize Homestuck would require more time and tangents than I can justify for this video, so I've gone over it in more detail in my primer video. But to grossly oversimplify, for those of you who don't want to spend 80 minutes watching my Homestuck book report, 4 kids, John, Rose, Dave, and Jade, play a game called Suburb. The game destroys Earth, but transports the kids into a magical world. They learn the purpose of Suburb is to create a new universe, but they're prevented from doing so. While they're playing Suburb, they begin to receive communications from a group of aliens called Trolls, of whom there are 12, but only 4 that matter: Karkat, Terezi, Kanaya, and Vriska. The Trolls turn out to have created Earth and its universe during their own game of Suburb, but were stopped from entering it by the same problem the humans are facing. The humans and Trolls eventually come up with a plan to hit the Reset Universe button in Suburb to try and create a scenario where they can complete the game. They'll then hop through the resulting rift in space-time to avoid being annihilated. Before the two groups can meet up, however, the Trolls go stir-crazy, leaving 6 Trolls dead, including Vriska, and a further 2 left behind in the old universe. In the Reset Universe, Jane, Roxy, Dirk, and Jake play Suburb, while talking to a pair of aliens named Calliope and Caliborn who belong to a species called Cherubs. While the Cherubs go on to play out their own side story in the background, the kids are eventually joined by the original humans and surviving Trolls. The now fully assembled cast gets into a bunch of shenanigans, one of which requires John to retcon the story to bring Vriska back to life. They have several emotional breakdowns, and eventually defeat the enemies standing in their way. Together, the humans and Trolls finish creating their new universe and live happily ever after. In my Worm video, I talked about bad twists ruining serialized stories that I had been avidly following for years. For a long time, Homestuck was at the top of the list of media that fit that bill. In fact, the initial plan for this video was to use Homestuck as a case study for how bad twists can ruin stories. But having gone back through the entirety of Homestuck for the first time since it ended, I don't think that thesis would actually hold water, because the set of twists that Homestuck developed in the final acts don't actually ruin the story. Don't get me wrong, they're definitely bad twists, and they definitely have a negative impact on the overall quality of Homestuck, but even taking them into account, I think I've come down on the side of Homestuck is still good, actually. To see why that is, let's take a look at the individual acts. Acts 1 through 4 rule. They're goofy and circuitous and inundated with self-referential comedy, but they're also extremely well-paced and constructed. If you're Homestuck's initial target audience, the type of person who was drawn in by other MSPAs or similar stories, Acts 1 through 4 are compelling and rewarding reads. If you're Homestuck's later target audience, the type of person who is obsessed with symmetry and adores personality-driven storytelling, Act 5 is the absolute best thing you could ever hope for. And even if Act 5 Act 1 isn't your cup of tea, Act 5 Act 2 is a genuinely fantastic capstone to Homestuck's first half. Act 6 is where things start to go off the rails. I like the Alpha Kids, and they have some fantastic character drama that plays out very well. 4 new primary characters is a lot to add this deep into the story, but I think they're handled fairly well. The problems come with the other 14 new characters added in Act 6. Calliope and Caliborn are mostly fine. I don't think it was necessary for us to see the origin story of Lord English, Homestuck's Critterscope villain, but I understand the impetus for their inclusion. And while I have problems with their portrayal as meta-skewerings of type of Homestuck fan, their role as troll parallels is useful. They become much more of a problem later on as they continue to take up space and influence the narrative without actually doing anything, but they aren't a bad concept. The opposite is true of the 12 Beforest trolls introduced in Act 6. Only 2 of the 12, Mina and Arania, actually influence the plot, and neither is a necessary addition. I don't like Arania's stupid plan to become alive and relevant again, but if it must happen, Vriska could have easily filled that role and done it much better. While I still think it's a massive missed shot to give Vriska a beautifully bittersweet and poignant ending to her arc, and then completely undo it twice over, it wouldn't be out of character for her to screw things up by stealing the Ring of Life to become alive again and then fight the contests. It fits her narrative role as a Thief of Light, it's similar to her plan to fight Bec Noir, so it makes sense she would want to try it again, and getting punished for ignoring potential character development to make the same old mistakes culminating in getting retconned out of the story would be a fitting end to her character. As for Mina, literally anyone could be rounding up an army. My pick would be Karkat, as it would complement his role as a leader, and could potentially conclude his frustration with alternate versions of himself. But like with Arania's plotline, the best solution would be to just not bother with the army at all. So many superfluous loose ends got neatly tied up by the trolls going nuts and killing each other at the end of Act 5, and here we are just one act later introducing an enormous number of new threads tied to an entirely new batch of even more trolls with even less characterization. It doesn't help that some of these new threads never actually come to fruition, making the whole thing feel like a waste of time. Arania is mentioned offhand once after her plan gets retconned, and her plot is fully abandoned. Mina's role as Ghost Army leader is completely perfunctory, and she never resolves the tension between her lust for power and the genuine love she has for her friends, and neither Lord English nor Caliborn is actually defeated. Even with the absolute deluge of new and utterly unimportant characters and cul-de-sac plotlines, the first 4 acts of Act 6 are pretty good. They're carried by the strong characterization of the Alpha Kids and some excellent action. And while the bulk of Act 6, Act 5 is based on a truly awful premise, there's still some great character drama. Act 6, Act 6, though. Starting with the obvious, Caliborn taking over the narrative makes the already cluttered act system nigh inscrutable. I find the Homestuck segments tedious and annoying, and while evoking these exact emotions appears to be the intent, neither the emotions nor Homestuck itself is additive to the story. Then there's the retconning. It is absolutely inexcusable to add in something that functions exactly like time travel but works with completely different rules from what's been established as time travel. But putting that aside, the result of the retcons is the single worst plot point in the entirety of Homestuck. A popular character coming back to life, fixing everything off screen, becoming the leader of the team and telling everyone what to do, then leaving to go fight the actual big bad while the main characters wrap up the rest of the story, sounds like a joke. It sounds like the premise of an incredibly self-indulgent fanfic. It sounds like something a delusional fan theorist would come up with. It is exactly what happens in Homestuck's 11th hour. In defense of Act 6, I do like the Stardust Glitches gimmick, there's a number of compelling character moments, and Collide is extremely cool. As for the Snapchat epilogue, it's dumb and I choose to believe it didn't happen. The story ends with everyone creating their new universe and getting to live their lives. We don't need to know the specifics of what happened afterwards, especially if those specifics are tonally dissonant and don't actually answer any of the hanging questions left by Act 7. The most annoying thing about Homestuck is that parts of it are actually really good all the way to the end. With other notable stories that have infamous fall-offs, the chance for a good ending, or even a satisfying ending, are dashed long before the credits roll. Not so for Homestuck. There is a distinct decline that starts in Act 6 and becomes more severe as we draw closer to the finale, but it's never so bad that the story couldn't pull itself together in the final hour. And if I'm being honest, it actually kinda does. Act 7 isn't a bad end to the story, just an abrupt and incomplete one. If you ignore the addendum epilogue anyway. Homestuck was built on a bedrock of character interaction, but the denouement is entirely devoid of dialogue. Don't get me wrong, Collide and Act 7 are fantastic visual climaxes, but there really needed to be some form of text to close out the story. If there was a doc scratch TikTok style narration for a few pages following Act 7, and a short final pestalog, I genuinely think Homestuck would be in the Web Original Hall of Fame instead of conjuring the mixed memories it does now. The Ouroboros is a depiction of a serpent biting or eating its own tail. A beast eternally consuming itself, it's a potent piece of iconography beloved by Gnostics and alchemists. Homestuck is one such Ouroboros. To speak of Homestuck is to invite your own destruction, as it is freakishly convoluted, yet if you persist in analyzing it, you will be rewarded with an esoteric mess. 10 years ago today, I saw that mess conclude, but having dissected the desiccated corpse of this once seemingly eternal serpent, now that 10 years of decay have made it easier to parse, I'm left not with frustration, but with fondness.